Welcome to Apaxim Go Live. Well, today we want to talk about the rainbow. So, as I was meditating on, you know, uh, when you put a prism and you shoot a beam of light, uh, the higher frequencies, the ones that go to the blue ultraviolet, deflect at a higher angle than slower frequencies like red, infrared. And I wondered why. And so here it goes. Um, Frequency. What is frequency? Frequency you can measure in hertz, but you also can measure in bandwidth, in its wavelength. You see, uh, for instance, 30 megahertz are 10 meters because the speed of light is a constant, right? So, and that's where you get the frequencies, no? And the wavelength. It's a function of the speed of light, which is 3. Instead of 2, 9, it's just 3. So that's why 30 megahertz are 10 meters. And if you go to 3 megahertz, then it's 100 meters. But if you go higher, it's inverse. 300, that is 1 meter. And so if you go to light, it's in nanometers. And if you go to audio, it's just in what we hear, it's in hertz. It's the same, like the stereo from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, for those of you interested in the technical specifications. So, if you play a note, imagine a frequency is like a string on a guitar, okay? The longer the string, the lower the frequency, because the tension is the same. And that's how you make frequencies. The wavelength, the lower the frequency, the longer the wavelength. So imagine that we make a frequency whose wavelength reaches from here to Jupiter, to Mars, to another planet. That's the wavelength. Or to another solar system. Yes, very, very low frequency. And the wavelength is that. So when you play, when you move the string on a guitar at any given place, the string resonates, it plays through all of its wavelength in an instant. Because it's entangled, it's the length of that frequency, hence subspace frequencies. So SETI, you have it wrong. You don't want to go ultra high frequencies to communicate. You see, one thing is how frequencies behave in the ionosphere. The higher the frequency penetrates, lower, but that's because we are within frequency itself, which is the frequency of Earth. It's a low frequency because everything has its own mechanical resonant frequency, right? So the only thing you create is a very low frequency transmitter, and you just put the wavelength, the distance of the stellar body that you want to communicate with. That's it. Subspace frequencies, in which you can talk. It would be like a particle transceiver. And what's a particle? Oh, the frequency itself. And so, I don't know it. I know it. If you're not into the wavy science thingy, man, it's difficult to understand. But I tried to explain it, with an analogy, so that you could understand what it means. I know some people need, images to see because they cannot comprehend words. But if there's some of you that like to turn this into some sort of video, sorry, when I talk, I usually imagine things. I see them and I just describe them in words. That's the way I think. And but I reckon it's difficult sometimes to put words into images. But the guitar is a good example. Just think of a string in a very low frequency whose bandwidth, its length, instead of 80 meters, like those are typical ham operator frequencies, 30 meters and and 80 and 40. That's those of you that are into the electromagnetic spectrum radio. Well, that's the length of the antenna. Well, imagine an antenna from here to Betelgeuse, 640 light years away. So it's a very, very low frequency. And I was reading some research on Sandia laboratories. They were experimenting with temperatures from 1 Kelvin to -0, and how its interactions with matter, which in a way correlates with what Dr. Judy Wood was talking about in 9/11, the evidence of that sophisticated control demolition with a ray gun that has the ability to freeze matter. And when you freeze it below and you create a distortion pattern, that's called fusion. So it's another state of matter, which is dustification. But that's another topic. It all has to do with frequencies. Frequencies, see, everything is electromagnetic spectrum. Our atoms, every molecule vibrates at a different frequency. But we all are, from the most inner part of us, the nuclei of the atom, the proton, the neutron, the electron. It's just potentials, frequencies, energy. Energy is always vibrating at a different frequency. So it all is that. Creation itself was made by the Logos, the Word of God. Frequency, rational frequency, much in the shape of the 12 notes. That's a depiction of the 12 notes. That beauty that Mozart and great Bach discovered. 12 notes, which are, we did not invent 12 notes, they created themselves because of fifths and harmonics. That's it, it's only 12. There can only be 12 without distortion patterns, which is very interesting. And it's all frequency, it's all art. So, and that's a conclusion for today's topic. This is Paxim, World at Evolution. And today's class was how to theoretically build subspace transceivers, also known as particle transceivers, by means of using the proper frequency. And that's it. Well, and that's my particle transceiver. It's just an antenna. So cheerio. And